which is the Syracuse, Rochester, and us. Hold on one second. Hold on. He does that? We got something on the screen there. Hold on, I'm sorry. Okay. We're going to talk about the top 5 violations that we see constantly. We'll also go into some breakouts of what some of those violations are. We're going to talk about how fines actually get imposed, what the process is. And then we're going to talk about how, as an agent or an admin, you can check your listings before you actually submit them. And then we'll get into some specific rules. This is an education and informative process. We want all questions. And if we don't have an answer to a question, since it is being recorded and we have people taking notes, we will definitely post the answers to questions we don't have answers for. And we will also be sending this PowerPoint out to everyone who signed up. Is that correct, Danielle?
Yes, and the managers.
And the managers as well. So this is your MLS team. Danielle is the MLS director, and Sue Miller and Wendy Brindle are work under her, and they do both the listing data checker, and they look at all of the notices that go out before they go out, right?
Along with answering.
And Wendy basically handles most of the calls that come in from the membership. So in the world of MLS, we follow the National Association of Realtors MLS model bylaws. And in those bylaws, there are mandated, which are mandatory. If you're a realtor organization, you must follow those mandated rules. So for example, clear cooperation, which is a listing must be submitted within 24 hours. That's a mandated rule. There's a lot of controversy over that rule, and it's constantly being evaluated. And you may also be aware that there are 4
710-870-2234. Thanks, Maureen.
Can you please mute yourself? I appreciate that. Thank you. You should be aware that there are 4 major lawsuits that NAR is involved with, and 3 of those deal with clear cooperation. So you should be familiar with the rule. I would suggest you go on to realtor.org and just search NAR lawsuits. And Katie Johnson, who is the chief legal officer for our association in Chicago, constantly updates what's going on with the lawsuits. A recommended lawsuit, which we have a recommended rule that we have adopted, is the change of listing status. It's optional, right? But as an MLS, we have decided to make it mandatory. And how does that work? So we have the alliance. We call it the New York State Alliance of MLSs, and it was created with Rochester, Syracuse, and Buffalo. And it was to streamline the processes between the major cities in Western New York. We have the same rules, same MLS system, the matrix system, same realist. We all have the same listing data checker, which we're going to be talking about. Danielle will be talking about a little bit. And there's a separate board, the Alliance Board. It's made up of members from each of those 3 MLSs. And they vote on the rules. And some are optional, and some they can make mandatory. So for example, if I go back a slide here, the change of listing status is in the MLS model bylaws is recommended. It's optional. We made it mandatory. Danielle's going to be covering these violations. Here are the top 5. Danielle, you want to come up? And again, you can put your questions in the chat, and please make sure you're muted. Thank you.
Hi, guys. You have to bear with me. This is my first time in front of an audience. So we have the top 5 violations. in front of you right now, and I want to put some perspective on all of this. From January to June, we had 9,034 listings go active in just the Buffalo MLS. So out of those 9,000, every single one of them is checked by what we call our listing data checker system. And 1,773 notices actually were sent out that your listing was in violation. That's only about 20% of the total listings that were activated. So it's not a lot that get these violations. And out of those, only 250 actually resulted in a fine being assessed. So the top ones that we have are your delayed showing and negotiations, your incorrect square footage, your public remarks, your duplicate listing, and your missing exterior photo as the first photo. And the next slide is going to show you all the rest of them and how we go down and how many get sent out. But first, I want to talk about those top three. So here's all the rest. And you'll see by the bottom, the no photo. This first half of this year, we've only sent out 19 notices on that. Everybody knows that rule. Can I check my own listings for violations? Okay. Slides got mixed around a little bit. Sorry about that. Yes. So when you activate your listing or you save it as incomplete, you can always check to see if the data you entered is valid data against Realist. This is not going to catch your violations that are on photos or attachments, but it will check your data itself. And you can go at any time and you'll see that you can check it right at the bottom under other options when you go into add edit, or when you hit save, this is the box that pops up. It says input succeeded. And at the bottom of it, it tells you check it, listing compliance check, avoid potential violations. Once you click that, this is what's going to come up on your screen. Anything that you see in red is telling you that, wait a minute, this data doesn't match to Realist. This is something that our LDC system is potentially going to flag. If you look the list date, entry date, that's both flagged as red because it doesn't meet our rules and it's more than 1 day because all listings have to be entered within 1 day of the listing date. If you look down a little bit further, you're going to see year bill description is in red, and right next to it, town, county, school, city, village taxes. Those are all missing. Those are required fields, so it's going to tell you. Your tax IDs, if they don't match, the left column or the middle column is your MLS values, and the right column is the PR value. That's your Realist value. If those don't match up, they're going to show in red. Same thing for your square foot, your area number, and so on. Now the rules. Delayed showing and negotiations. This is our top rule that's violated. And it can be a little confusing. Where do I put things? What do I have to attach? But the main thing with this rule is that the form needs to be attached at your listing activation. You can't attach it 2 minutes after. The system has already started checking your listing and sees that the attachment is not there. So you have to make sure that is attached when you activate the listing. The next thing the system is going to check is it in both the public and the private remarks? If it's not in one of them, it's going to flag the listing. So always make sure your documents are attached. You got it in the private, you have it in the public. This is information the public needs to know, so you can't put it just in the private. That's something we see a lot. It's only in the private. Incorrect square footage. Your square footage does need to match up to what the Realist value is. Realist can be wrong. Tax records aren't updated, and they just put a 200 square foot addition on. You can put in that additional square footage, but you do need to state where you got that square footage from. So in your public remarks, square footage based off addition agent measured. You know, square footage based off a new appraisal. Anything that explains in your public remarks. We did recently just add a field for square footage source. Unfortunately, that field is not mandated on public websites. So we do still require it in the public remarks. Okay. A good way to check to make sure that your square footage is matching up to Realist. When you activate your listing, if you used Realist to populate in your square footage, when you look at your full realtor view, it's going to show 500 and then a bracketed number. That bracketed number is going to be your square footage from Realist. So if those two numbers match, you are golden. You have nothing else you need to worry about. But if you increase the square footage because they put an addition on, or you had an appraisal done and the square footage from the appraisal is higher, those numbers are no longer going to match. You will need to make sure that you have the square footage adjustment explained in your public remarks. The third one that's in our top 5 is our public remarks. We get a lot of questions about the public remarks because it's information the public needs to know. Well, unfortunately, the public remarks are only for describing the physical property being offered for sale. You cannot put in there anything that is marketing info, such as calls to action, telling them to contact yourself, contact your broker, call for an appointment. Showing information should only be in there if it is delayed showing or negotiations, because those are required for MLS. Personal information, company information, web addresses, phone numbers, co-listers, any kind of link. Doesn't matter if it links to you, it links to a public website. A link is not permitted in the public remarks. Bonus information. Words or phrases that could violate fair housing laws. We're all familiar with those. We do not want to violate those. Any other inappropriate information should not be in the public remarks. Some of those examples would be call today. That is considered a call to action. Call to schedule a showing. Call town for zoning approval. It doesn't matter who you're telling them to call or contact. They cannot contact anybody in the public remarks. Watch for children, grandchildren playing in a huge fenced backyard. This would be fair housing. We don't want that in the public remarks. Private financing available. We do see this one quite a bit. This is inappropriate in the public remarks because it's considered bonus information or financing information. Seller offers 12 months home warranty with acceptable offer. Again, this would be considered a bonus. If you buy this house, you're getting a bonus because you get 12 months of a home warranty. So none of those phrases, along with anything else that's not about this, that's physically describing the property, should not be in the public remarks. Now that we covered the top 3, because those top 3 are 50% of the fines we send out. Do I have any questions? Doreen, do we have any in the chat?
There is one in the chat. Are we getting better or worse compared to last year?
We are getting better. I don't have the numbers with me. We do have less fines being assessed than last year, and the number of notices going out, you're getting a warning and it is getting corrected. So that is a good thing. You're reading your notices. That's what we want you to do. And if you're not sure about your notice, what it says or what we're trying to have corrected, call us. Wendy's happy to answer. Sue's happy to answer. I'm happy to answer.
Got 2 more. Can the last 2 examples be in the private remarks?
Yes. Any of those examples that I had on the slide, those can go in your private remarks. Your private remarks are for anything else that you need to convey to another agent.
Okay, and then so we shouldn't say something like USDA financing available in the public remarks?
No, because that's not a description of the physical property. That has to do with financing, and that would be inappropriate in the public remarks.
That's all I see.
Any other ones, Doreen?
That's all that's in there.
Okay, thank you. So now duplicate listings, this was the fourth one in our top 5. Duplicate listings, they are permitted as long as your property is zoned that way. You'll see properties that are zoned both single family and 2-family because they were converted at one time. So you can put it in if the zoning in realist says both. When you put in these duplicate listings, you have to make sure that you're identifying the opposing listing in both listings. And this needs to be done in your public or private remarks. It doesn't have to be in both public or private. Once a duplicate listing does get sold, you can't close both of them. And we do see that a lot. We don't send out a violation on that or a fine on that. We'll just contact you and let you know which one would you like deleted, because you can only get credit in our system for one of the listings. Yeah, the most common reason that you'll get a duplicate listing violation is that your listing is not referencing the other listing. Because the public needs to know, and another agent needs to know that, hey, this property is also listed under single family or condo townhouse.
Danielle,
Yes,
is that based on what's in realist or just me eyeballing that?
No,
I
we
know they
go,
converted it.
so the question was, is that based off realist for the zoning or just what I think it is? That's based off realist. We do use the realist zoning, the land use, for those references.
In the city, there's a lot of doubles converted to singles,
Mhm.
a lot. And it's not reflected in realist that it's a double that was converted to a single. But clearly it's a single.
In that case, you should be contacting the city to have it changed. Or have the owner contact the city, obviously not you, but the owner should be contacting the city to have that updated, because that's affecting their taxes and whatnot. But it should be entered as a realist explanation for the zoning. The next one is the missing exterior photo as the first photo. All property types except vacant land and all statuses have to include an exterior view of the home, the main building. The first photo, and it must be submitted at the time the listing is activated. Again, you can't add it 2 minutes after you activate the listing. The listing's already been checked by listing data checker and the violation's already been flagged and sent out. The biggest thing with the missing exterior photo as the first photo, we all love the aerial photos. You have to be able to clearly see the exterior view of the home, the street view, the backyard view. If it's a lakefront, a lot of the lakefront properties, the back of the house is really the front of the house. And you can use that as your first photo. But it has to be a view of what somebody on the ground would see. If your first photo is just the roof and an aerial view, you can't tell what that house actually looks like. So that photo will get flagged as missing the first exterior photo. Image not in compliance. So all of your images, not just the first one, cannot include office, agent, and personal promotional information anywhere on the photos. It can't be in the framing, it can't be in a banner, anything. Any and all photos submitted cannot contain a watermark or images of any identifiable person, real, animated, computer generated, or otherwise. And I'll have an example of that in the next one. A banner on a photo, not permitted except with the exception of virtually staged photos. And in that case, you can only put this photo is virtually staged. some examples of what would not be permitted. The first one, a floor plan. You can have a floor plan. However, you cannot have your brokerage logo in the corner of the floor plan. The second one, this is one that made national news. It was not from our MLS, but around the Halloween season, they had Michael Myers in all of their photos. It's not a real person, I know, but you still cannot have a person in any photos. No matter what kind of person it is, even a movie character.
It's the agent and it's being shown in the mirror, taking the pictures. I see that all the time.
We do see that also. We've also seen some other creative ways that people promote themselves in their photos, such as writing on a chalkboard in the kitchen, call and so for a showing. You can't do that. We've seen photos on walls that have had the actual family photo removed and a company logo put on a photo, put in that frame. Same thing with TV screens. They'll put their business card on a TV screen, we've seen. It looks like a commercial, but when you take a closer look, it's actually a business card. Those are not permitted. We like the enthusiasm with trying to get yourself out there, but unfortunately, it's not permitted. Yep. All of your photos that you enter into the MLS, these are being checked by a new program that we've launched end of last year, I believe, called Recipe AI. It's an AI program that goes through and it looks for anything that shouldn't be there. People, animals, license plates. You'll see notices come to you that are courtesy notices. And that's because your photo's not actually in a violation of the image compliance rule, but it may have some personal information that the general public really shouldn't be aware of, such as a license plate in an exterior photo on a car. Children playing in a backyard. You will also get those for images on a TV screen. So like an actual TV show is playing. It flags the people in those, but those are courtesy notices. So those are not something you would get a fine on. It's just something you should be concerned with, that the public doesn't need to see that kind of information on your owners. Next, you have your incorrect tax ID numbers. The tax ID numbers have to match to the tax ID number supplied by our tax vendor Realist. The tax ID is the big, long number. There are abbreviated versions that the towns and counties use. Those can't match up if you enter those into the matrix system to Realist, so they will get flagged. Those listings that can't be pulled up in Realist, the data is being held back and can't be checked. It's not to your benefit to not have the correct tax ID in there. Late listings. If you're not aware, your listing does need to be entered within 24 hours of the list date on the contract. Our contracts, you may use your own company contracts, but the being our contracts that are available on Instinet, on page 1 of those contracts, it does have a spot for the list date. That list date can be later than the date that you're signing those contracts. That list date could be a week out. That gives you time to get your photos done, have any cleaning done on the property that needs to be done, small maintenance jobs, before you plan to put it into the MLS. So that list date is when you have to have it entered within 24 hours. We no longer give freebies for weekends and holidays. Weekends and holidays do count. If you have a list date on a Friday, that listing does need to be entered into the MLS by Saturday. If it's not, you're going to get a late listing violation. Statuses. Status correction. On market statuses, we all know these are active and continue to show. Active, it's open, anybody can come see the property. Continue to show, the property has accepted a contract, but we're going to continue to show it and accept backup offers. our off-market statuses, our under contract, pending, closed, temp off market, withdrawn, and expired. Anytime a listing is in any of these categories except expired, it cannot be relisted by any other party, including yourself. If you have a listing that's in a withdrawn status and you're gonna put it back into the MLS, you will get a violation for a duplicate listing. You will get a notice that your listing is currently withdrawn and cannot be re-entered. You're in the wrong status. If you accept a contract, you have 24 hours, including weekends and holidays, to update that status. So if on Friday you accept a contract, it doesn't matter if you haven't fulfilled your contingencies yet, such as earnest money, attorney approval. By Saturday, that listing should be changed to under contract, pending, or continue to show. One of the biggest questions we get is, what is the difference between temp off market and withdrawn? Withdrawn means that nobody else can list this listing and I no longer have access to it. And I'm gonna hold that owner until my contract is expired. They can't relist it with anybody else. It's not gonna come back on the market. It's not going to be available. Temp off market, this is a status you would use if you think that listing might come back on. You can still go in it if you're in temp off market status and edit that listing. You can change it back to active. You can make changes to anything on your input forms if you have that ability. Incorrect area numbers. Incorrect area numbers. All properties must be listed according to the address and assessment jurisdiction only. You cannot put in a school district or a town that's more favorable to your listing. The easiest way to make sure that you're picking the right area for your listing is when you're in the area box, at the end of the name of the city or town, there's a number. That number should be matching up to the first 6 digits of your tax ID number. Okay. Does anybody have any questions before I go through the rest of the rules? You're about
There's
half-
some in the chat. Let's see. Okay, who determines how much the fines are?
The fines are determined by the rescore. Do you want to go with this one?
So I mentioned the 3 separate MLSs. The only difference between the MLSs basically is the fees that are imposed. And the MLS board met last month and we evaluated all of the fines, the amount of fines, the time period for the fines, or the time period for the to get a notice corrected. That all happens here in our Reese MLS. And I just want to backtrack for a second. I say this all the time and I truly mean it. We're not in the fine business. What we are in is the data integrity business. So when Jeremy goes into the system and he has a client and they're pulling up information and looking at listings and it's inaccurate, how does that make all of you feel when the data in the system is not as accurate as what consumers can see on third-party websites? So when we are, it appears at times we're heavy-handed, it's to make sure that the data that all of you use on a daily basis, multiple times a day, is as accurate as it can be. Because there are other avenues, consumers, you want to be in the forefront, you want to be in the face of the consumer as the expert. And if we don't have that accurate data, if we're not making sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, that is when it becomes a problem. And I truly mean that. So, any other questions, Doreen?
Yeah, what if the listing is an online sale auction How can potential clients find the sale without a link?
They would need to contact their agent to find out how to do that. And their agent would reach out to the listing agent. It could be in the private remarks, but it cannot be in the public remarks.
Okay, then why is placing the MO number in the first line so important?
Is that in regards to a duplicate listing? I'm assuming.
Hey, Gerard, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, that's when I was asking the question, when you were talking about the duplicate listings, and you're saying that it has to be in the first line in the remarks, and it just seems excessive.
So the MLS Rules Board wants it in the, the Alliance also wants it in the first line so that it's clear and it's not missed. You might start reading the public remarks, and if it's at the bottom of the public remarks, you've got halfway through and decide this property isn't for me. So that's why we want it in the first line.
And that's an alliance.
And that is an Alliance rule. That is something that has to be agreed upon by all three MLS.
Going back to the fines that John just addressed, did you say that the alliance is being consistent with all the rules, but some of the alliances are having variations in the amount of fines? Just wanted to clarify.
Yes, that is correct. And I'll give you a good example. So Rochester and Syracuse, when you get a fine in either of those markets, that specific fine will follow you for your entirety in their MLS. So for example, if I got a fine for not having the proper first photo in say 2015, and I did it again in 2020, I'm gonna get an automatic fine. That's what happens in Syracuse and Rochester. In Reese, at December 31st, we start over on the 1st, we wipe out your history of notices and fines. So if you did something in 2015 and you do it again in 2020, you're not gonna have an automatic fine. So that is one difference. The fine schedule, the fee schedule is one because of antitrust and basically antitrust between the MLSs. We don't know, I don't know what their fines are. They don't know what our fees are, and I don't know what theirs are.
So we have a few more. If we
Okay.
currently hit listing temporary off the market and are going to relist it with a new listing, what status should we make it, or do we just expire it and relist the property?
If you're gonna, it's currently temporary off the market, you got a new listing agreement and you're gonna put it in as a brand new listing, your temp off market listing needs to be expired out first. You can expire it out and then immediately re-enter it, but that original listing does need to be expired out first.
Are you going to discuss signage and when a sign can go up as it relates to the signed listing contract?
Part of
It's- If that is part of clear cooperation, we don't have an individual slide for that. Clear cooperation says that you cannot advertise your property more than 24 hours before it is activated in the MLS. So your sign cannot go in the yard. You should not be publicly marketing it on social media, in mailings, more than 24 hours before it goes in the MLS.
Can you put a listing in continue to show status if it is contingent on the buyer selling their home, or does it need to be under contract, do not show?
Okay, so if you're gonna continue to show it and you've accepted a contract, it's contingent, you would use the continue to show status. As long as you keep showing that property and accepting backup offers.
And I don't see any more in the chat.
Okay. So then our next rule is the general compliance. This is used for any violation that does not have a preset rule in the listing data checker system. There are rules that we do not get very many violations on. It's not useful to put the work into having the rule created in LDC. Some of those would be inappropriate words in the directions field. putting in your brand, like call so-and-so in the directions. We don't have an actual rule that checks that in LDC. So this is where we would use general compliance. Somebody else has reported it to us, or we've seen it ourselves when he does look at hundreds of listings a day. And she'll catch them. Same thing with VR pricing. VR pricing would be sent out as a general compliance, because you are required to check both the mark or the box for VR pricing and have it the first line of your public remarks that this property will accept offers between X amount and X amount or Y amount. The accuracy of listing data. This is a mandatory rule from NAR. The participants and subscribers are required to submit accurate listing data and required to correct any known errors. You would get this if your bedrooms or bathrooms don't match to the public record. If any other data that our system doesn't match to Realist itself, we will send this out because we've caught that what you entered and Realist don't match. Incorrect tax information. Enter only the total true taxes. Do not enter taxes reflecting any exemptions, because the exemptions can vary from individual to individual. The person who currently owns the home, they can qualify for a VA discount. The next owner may not. So they need to know what their taxes would be without any exemptions. The tax information is always available for most, well, I shouldn't say always, is usually available online. We do have a majority of the links to the public sites for the cities, towns, and villages and counties. If you go to bnar.org under Realtor Resources, scroll to the bottom, there is a link that takes you to a PDF of all the links that we have. We've gone through and saved them all, made them very accessible for you. This is the site that we use also to check taxes if we get a notice that, hey, these taxes include exemptions. We'll go onto those same public sites and check your taxes. Attachments. Attachments are required if the form is required by state or federal laws specific to the property. Examples of this would be the property condition disclosure statement, lead-based paint addendum. The forms have to be attached at the same time the listing is entered into the MLS. Again, if you attach them 2 minutes after you activated the listing's already been checked and it's been flagged that there's no attachments. You should be naming these attachments as what they are. Putting them in as one lump sum, the system can't see what kind of forms you have. Broker responsibility for data accuracy. It is the listing broker's responsibility to make sure all the listing information is accurate when entered into the MLS system. This responsibility cannot be shifted to the buyer or buyer's agent, broker, attorney in the public or private remarks. Putting in your public or private remarks, buyer to verify, agent to verify. That is information that you should have verified because it is required field in the MLS, such as square footage. Your taxes, those are required. You should be verifying those prior to entering them into the MLS. You can't pass that responsibility to verify that information off to somebody else. No photo. This is the one that everybody should know this. Every property except vacant land has to include an exterior view of the land or exterior view of the home as the first photo, and it must be submitted at the time the property is made active. You can't add your photo again 2 minutes after you've activated the listing. It's already been checked. Make sure that you have a photo. It can be any exterior photo as long as you can see the main building. Branded virtual tours. The branded virtual tours field shall contain only a URL link to the specific property listing. The URL cannot contain your company info, your agent info. A virtual tour is defined as a 360-degree tour of a property or a slideshow of the static pictures, which may include audio, visual, or audio information regarding the listing, or may not include audio or visual information regarding the listing agent and or company, including contact information. Advertising in your virtual tours is not permitted unless it's in the branded virtual tour field. In the MLS, there are two fields. There's the virtual tour link unbranded and virtual tour link branded. Your unbranded field can't have anything that connects to you or your company. Some of the examples of those are this top one. It looks okay at first, but because that box with their contact information is not in it. Once you click on that little person at the top left corner of that small box across top, that's when their contact information opens up. That cannot be in the unbranded virtual tour field. The bottom image around the framing of the virtual tour, they have their photo, their contact me button, and their name and brokerage. You can't have that on your unbranded virtual tour. The unbranded virtual tours is what goes out to the public websites, such as Zillow, Realtor.com to find your home. Your branded virtual tour field, the one that you are allowed to put your contact information in, that link will only go out to your brokerage or personal website. That link won't go out to Zillow. Now this is the fun one. When do I get a fine? Looks a little complicated. Trust me, it really isn't. Every year, like John said, you start off with a clean slate. Now for each rule, you get your first violation warning. What you get after you get that first violation is you get 2 days to correct that violation with nothing else happening. You won't get a fine. You won't get any other notices as long as you correct it after that first notice. If you don't correct it within the 2 days, you are going to then get a fine, and it'll be $100 fine the first time. You'll then get 5 more days to correct that violation. If you don't correct it in that second time frame of 5 days, you're going to get another $100 fine and 5 more days. If after that third time period to correct your violation, you still haven't corrected it, the MLS will potentially step in at this point. We want to make sure that our data is the most accurate it can be. And if at this point there is a violation against you that we can correct ourselves because you have the incorrect area number, which we can find in Realist. You have a photo that is in violation, which we can go in and remove. We will do that at that point because we want to have the most accurate data in there. We don't want to let inaccurate data sit in there longer than necessary. And we do charge a correction fee of $250 for this to be done. So if it's not something that we can correct, you every 5 days will keep accumulating $100 fines. So now that first warning that you got, that first warning isn't just going to you. It's going to go to you. It's going to go to the admin in your office. It's going to go to your manager, and it's going to go to your broker. And if your office has anybody else that they've contacted us to have included, it'll also go to that person, such as the compliance officer. So there are at least 3 to 4 people who are getting that notice. So you really need to be checking your emails, talking to your managers, talking to your compliance officers if you have them. Make sure none of your listings are in violation. So now 6 months go by, you violate that same rule again. Let's say it was public remarks. And you've already gotten your warning. You're aware that this is what the public remarks rule was. Now you violate it again. This time, you're going to get an immediate fine. And that would be the second red box in the middle. So this second immediate fine, or this second notice, does get the immediate fine. If you weren't fined on your first one and you corrected it, this one is going to be $100. If your first warning did result in the fine, this is now $200. because you've already been fined once for this rule. So now this is your second fine for this rule, it's $200. You're gonna get your 2 days to correct it. If it's not corrected, we're gonna go through the same path. You're gonna get another $100 fine for a subsequent notice. You're gonna get 5 days to correct that violation again, with all these notices going to the same people that you were originally notified with. And again, if it's not corrected after the second time frame, we're gonna correct it if we can, and there will be a correction fee applied. If we can't, you'll keep accumulating $100 subsequent fines. Every time you have another violation of the same rule, the immediate fine amount will go up by $100, up to $300. Yes, this is the same process that Rochester and Syracuse use. Again, their fine amounts are different, but they do have the same fine structure. Do we have any questions on that? Because that's a big one.
Well, there was a question in the chat. Can you clarify if the seller accepts an offer that is contingent upon the purchaser selling their home, sales contingent? Does the property stay in active status, or do you add to the private remarks and showing structures that there is a sales contingent offer on the house?
That is an option. You have to make sure that you do have a contingency on the house. You can't keep it in an active status and mark that in the showing instructions, contingent on the sale of another property, if it is not contingent. That contingency is not to be used for waiting for attorney approval, things like that. If it is contingent on the sale of a property, you can keep it as active, and in the showing instructions, mark contingent on the sale of another property. But you do need to continue to show it and accept backup offers on it. Anything else, Doreen?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. The biggest thing with the fine structure is to remember 1 warning per rule per year. It's not per listing. We have no other questions. John, do you have anything you need to add?
Hopefully this has added some clarity to the process. And again, Danielle, Wendy, and Sue are here to answer questions. You can email us. We try to simplify this a little bit. I can tell you on a daily basis, Wendy is reviewing a minimum of 150 listings a day. Is that about right?
Probably at least, yeah, depending on the day.
Yeah, so again, the data integrity is the most important thing. And as professionals, you want the data you're using to be as accurate as possible. I want to shift gears for a second. If there are no other questions, Doreen.
I see none in the chat.
Okay. Couple of things. On August 9th, we're having a class on artificial intelligence. It's going to be on Zoom. It's dynamic. It's relating to how your business is changing. It's 1 hour. I strongly suggest you go into your portal and check that out. On September 8th, I mentioned the 4 lawsuits. The world is changing, especially if you're a buyer's agent, on how you may be getting compensated in the future. If you're a broker, owner, or manager, or a buyer's agent, you definitely want to participate in this 2-hour seminar on what you can do based on these 4 lawsuits and how we are all reading the tea leaves on what's going to happen with buyer's agents and how they're compensated. Those are August 9th and September 8th. They're in your portal. Doreen, are they already in the portal?
Yes, they're in the portal. And also just to let you know, the AI, leveraging your AI, is not approved for CE, but it's definitely a seminar that you don't want to miss.
Anything else? Anybody have any other questions? We really hope this has been informative. We'll probably do this another probably Q1 of next year before the spring market heats up, just as a refresher. And again, you can find all the rules online at bnar.org, under resources.
Or on your portal.
And, or through the portal, right? And if you want us to come out and do an office visit, or if you want to come into the office and sit down with us, we'd be more than willing to do that as well. I appreciate it. No more questions. Thank you. Have a safe day.